The foreperson is standing in that courtroom. Let's wait for reporting from inside the courtroom. The control room listening to this very closely. Aaron, you are as well from our team inside the courtroom and in the overflow. The verdict is now being read. As you can see on the screen here, count 1, guilty. Count 2, the former president found guilty. Count 3, guilty. We await count 4 here. As you can see, the first 3 counts, the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, found guilty of 3 felony counts so far. The foreperson in that courtroom. Count 4, guilty. Count 5, guilty. Count 6, guilty. As we continue to enter in what we're learning from the courtroom, it's our belief that first 19 counts, I'm being told, the former president has been found guilty of. Counts 20 through 23 found guilty as well. So correct me, control room, all the way through count 23 now found guilty. We are now up to count 26 and count 27 found guilty as well. So again, I'm going to pause here. He's been found guilty 31 counts now of guilty as we wait for the graphic to catch up to the reporting coming from the courthouse. Count 33 and counts 34 coming in right now. Guilty on all counts. This jury in New York City, a jury of his peers, finding the former president guilty on every single felony count brought against him by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Aaron Katersky outside the courthouse. Let's go to you for first reaction.
An incredible verdict on this day in May, late May. The former president of the United States convicted as charged. 34 counts of falsifying business records. And David, as the crowd outside this courthouse found out, a big cheer went up from opponents of the former president who had been massing in the park across the street from the courthouse. Just a whooping cheer, and they continue to make a lot of noise. There have been supporters of the former president here as well. It looks like many of them are hanging in there, but are remaining silent as the former president has been convicted on all 34 counts of falsifying business records, meaning, David, the jury believed the Manhattan District Attorney's theory of the case that the former president falsified these records to cover up a conspiracy to corrupt the 2016 election by hiding lewd stories from his past. David?
Aaron, as we know from the instructions from the judge in this case, Juan Merchan, telling that jury that they could not convict solely on the testimony of Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's longtime former fixer, friend, and attorney, that there must be corroborating evidence in this case that they also believe in coming up with any sort of verdict. I glean from that then in the discussions within that jury room, and we will learn more in the days ahead, that they then pointed to other evidence, and we know about the request that they look at testimony from David Pecker, for example, to be reread back to them this morning, that is the kind of corroborating evidence that they must have leaned in on to come up with 34 guilty findings on every count here. The former president found guilty as we're on the air this afternoon. Aaron, again, testimony from David Pecker and other evidence presented by the prosecution, they must have leaned on, not solely the testimony of Michael Cohen here.
They were told they couldn't rely solely on Michael Cohen because he was an accomplice in the alleged, or now found, scheme to corrupt the 2016 election. And so they did need corroborating evidence and testimony, and they may have found it in the testimony of David Pecker, because one of the things they asked to hear again today was how both men described a meeting in August of 2015, 2 months after Donald Trump had announced his candidacy, when prosecutors said this conspiracy was hatched. David Pecker at the National Enquirer would buy and bury unflattering stories. He said he agreed to be the eyes and ears of the Trump campaign, and prosecutors said it amounted to a campaign finance violation. And Michael Cohen described the meeting very much the same way, saying that he recalled Pecker telling Trump he would be the eyes and ears of the Trump campaign. Perhaps that was the corroborating evidence and testimony that the jury needed, David. They also wanted to make sure they understood the judge's instructions of how to find out how to convict somebody of falsification of business records. And the judge told them that even if Trump didn't personally falsify the records, that he could be found guilty if he caused other people, like an accounting department at the Trump Organization or Michael Cohen or someone else, to falsify those records on his behalf.
All right, Aaron Katersky, stay with us here. Aaron Katersky, who has covered every day of this trial for us outside the courthouse there. Obviously, we also have a team inside court, both in the courtroom and in this overflow room. And I just want to bring everyone at home watching our ABC News Live coverage here of an historic day here. The former President Donald Trump found guilty on all 34 counts in the hush money case that involved Stormy Daniels in the lead up to the 2016 election. Found guilty again on all counts by a jury of his peers. Again, we know the makeup of this jury come from a cross-section of life in this country. 2 attorneys among that jury pool. It's been said in other cases along the way that the prosecution doesn't always like having lawyers sitting in that jury box, but in this case, both sides agreed to those 2 jurors in particular, lawyers who perhaps, as we'll find out in the days to come, might have helped explain some of the very detailed jury instructions from Judge Juan Merchan. Again, the former president you see there on the screen found guilty on all counts. Some of the color coming in from the courtroom from our team. The former President Donald Trump watching very closely as the jury was polled. They all replied yes when asked if this was their verdict. The district attorney himself, Alvin Bragg, stern-faced in the courtroom. Todd Blanche was the one who asked to poll the jury. Of course, that is the lead defense attorney in this case for Donald Trump. Donald Trump watching again as they were being polled, looking over at the jury as each one of them was individually polled on the verdict. One of our reporters describing the former president as slumped over in his chair, slumped somewhat, looking at the jury as they delivered the verdict, adjusting his head each time to get a look at each of the jurors as, again, they were polled individually. So, again, just describing, and it's obviously the limitations of the court system here in New York, no cameras in court. But as we know, we've described to you what would happen. The judge would enter that courtroom. Donald Trump would stand along with others in that courtroom. The jury then re-entering, the 4-person standing, saying we do have a verdict. The judge asking the 4-person what that verdict would be. And then we watched even the screen here, the graphics could not keep up with the speed at which the verdict was delivered. 34 counts. All 34 of them, the former president found guilty in this hush money case. I want to bring in Dan Abrams with us just as we came on the air, now with me here in the studio. And Dan, you and I have talked. There were all sorts of plausible scenarios here, what the jury could decide. Perhaps guilty on some counts, not guilty on others. Obviously, the chance of a mistrial or a hung jury, it would take just one juror for that scenario. That's not what played out this afternoon. To have 34 counts and to have a jury find over the course of 2 days the former president guilty on all 34 counts, what does this say to you?
So let's be clear. If there had been a split verdict, if there had been convictions on, let's say, 9, just the ones, for example, where Donald Trump had signed the checks, it would have been unlikely, unusual. Most people watching this case expected either there's going to be an acquittal, there'll be a hung jury, or they'll be guilty on all charges. It would have been surprising if the jurors had split the verdicts, because it's really all basically the same set of facts. It's just a question of which ledger and which check. So either you believe it or you don't. And so the fact that it's 34, we have to be careful here, right? Let's not overstate what that means. Because, for example, when it comes to sentencing, it's not as if the sentence is going to involve 34 counts where each count ends up being served consecutively. There is almost no doubt that whatever sentence happens here, the sentence will be concurrent, meaning all of it will be served at the same time for the 34. So in
You
effect,
talk about a sentence.
Yeah.
So let me stop you right there, because viewers at home are going to ask immediately, what does this mean? Could the former president be sentenced to potential time behind bars? We know there is the potential for that, though extremely unlikely for a first-time offender, correct?
I think it is unlikely. This is the lowest level felony in the state of New York. We talk about misdemeanors versus felonies, but there's also different levels of felony. This is a Class E felony, the lowest kind. Donald Trump has never been convicted of a crime before. I think as a result, it is unlikely, not impossible, that he would be sentenced to prison time in connection with this case. There are other options, right? There is probation. I think the other potential option could be home confinement. Can you imagine that? And in an effort, if it were to happen before the election, someone who wants to be out on the campaign trail. Again, I think any serving of a sentence, though, very unlikely to happen before the election. A number of things will happen first. First, he'll do an interview with the probation department. That is typical in any case. You have a meeting where you talk to he's going to have this meeting with a probation officer, because the probation department then recommends what sentence they think the person ought to get.